Welcome to Small Biz Life, episode 53, Protecting Your Business from Disaster.
Does this sound familiar?
Oh my God, I have so much to do today.
Don't forget to breathe.
But I have almost 400 emails in my inbox and 30 phone calls to make.
Have you looked into getting a virtual assistant yet?
Oh, and I need to schedule all my social media posts.
Did you drink anything today?
I had coffee.
Did you eat today?
Did I mention coffee's a bean?
This is Small Biz Life.
Welcome to this episode of Small Biz Life. My name is Kristen Ingram.
And I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And we are husband and wife small business owners who are walking through this journey with you on the Small Biz Life.
Well, very nice to meet you.
Yeah. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much for being with us again. And if this is your first time listening to the show, we're happy to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking about protecting your business from disaster. And when we originally were brainstorming this idea, we were thinking about the hurricane down in Florida. We were talking about, the floods in Louisiana. And as we're sitting down to record this, it's actually the 15th anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize that when we were kind of brainstorming this episode earlier in the week. But you guys know a lot of times we record on Sundays, and it just so happens that today is the anniversary of 9/11. So that's why I think we're both kind of feeling that today, because where we live, we are smack in the middle between Boston and New York.
Yep.
And so this is something that I think, especially, on the anniversary, is something that really hits both of us. So, we didn't intend to have this episode, line up with the anniversary, but it just so happens that, this is when we're doing it. So, I think there's not as much excitement in either one of our voices today, right? As there usually is. But, I think that this is a really important topic because there are so many natural disasters that are affecting people right now. And so we want to make sure that your business is prepared for, these type of events. And, we're not just talking like big natural disasters either, but we're also talking about things like computers crashing, or theft in your house or your office. So we're going to kind of go through like all of these different options when we're talking about protecting your business. Yeah,
and it's also about the people involved. Outside of unexpected natural disasters or acts of terrorism that could happen, important key people who are involved in your business could suddenly pass away, and it could be a shock. And it's something that you have to keep in mind because certain types of emergencies have great risk of bringing businesses to a grinding halt, and you need the ability to get back up and running as quickly as possible. In part, not only just to keep the revenue flowing, but sometimes in really tough times, working is important. Maintaining your life is important, or else it's easily to get consumed in the fear or anger or anguish caused by any moment.
Right. And I think, I was actually really lucky last year that I got to hear a speaker from Cantor Fitzgerald talk about his experience on 9/11. So Cantor Fitzgerald was a business that was in the World Trade Center, and they lost 658 of their 960 New York employees that day.
Yeah, 2/3.
And so, think about, now I know, we're small businesses, but think about the impact on your business if you lost like a key subcontractor or a key employee. How would that affect your business?
Or especially for anyone who's a partnership, if a partner is to pass away, or even more so in a sole proprietorship, if the person running the business, the owner, died, what impact would that have on the business?
Right. And, we see this a lot in small businesses where, there's not enough planning going on regarding either, a natural disaster or loss of a key employee or key owner. So, we're going to kind of go through all of that in today's episode. So I think the first thing that you need to think about is you need to think about having a disaster recovery plan.
Yeah. And you might have plans because you kind of need to look at it in a few different ways. So if you were to lose the place that you performed the task at, what would it take to get back up and running quickly where you're at? Whether it be a fire, a tornado, a hurricane, or a meteor strikes down and blows up the building. No one's maybe hurt, but obviously the business itself cannot function with that location gone. You've seen this a lot. I think this year you think a lot about this when you think about the poor people in the Southeast United States have got so much rain, much more than usual. There's been tremendous flooding, especially in Louisiana as of late.
Right. So, the thing I would kind of think about is think about the region of the country that you're in and what are the common types of natural disasters that you might have in that area. So we live in New England. We are prone to large snowstorms that can knock out your power, for a long time. We also have hurricanes occasionally that will blow in and cause damage and knock out power. Occasionally, very rarely, we have tornadoes. But a couple years ago, we actually had a major tornado that hit north of us and did significant damage to a number of towns from western Massachusetts to central Massachusetts.
And the thing with something like a tornado is no matter what the strength of the tornado is, when it drops down into more densely populated areas, the likelihood that major damage can occur is big, and it can have an impact on where you are. Just north of us right now in the same town, they are doing emergency repairs on their highway. That's affected all of the businesses that use that section of the highway, with employees going to work, with people traveling to do business. Maybe some people are avoiding that area that didn't used to. There are an infinite number of variables here that you have to think about. And the bigger of a risk they are to your business, that's when you really have to have a plan in place for them.
Well, it's interesting because there's a business that I drive by when I go to the university, and they're doing it looks like they're doing utility work in the road.
Yeah.
Because where we are, a lot of the utilities are actually underground. But so they're doing some type of utility work, and there's a big sign out front of this business that says the business is open, but there's no way to get into it. And so I imagine that that's got to be incredibly detrimental for their business, because people are going, I don't want to deal with the traffic of getting there. And then I don't even know how to get into their driveway because it's blocked off with cones, even though there's a sign that says the business is open.
And think about this from the aspect too, if this is like a retail establishment, a restaurant, something where they need traffic in the location, this is a major damaging event. If you had a location where your customers came to you at, whether it was to buy something or for whatever reason, if you were dependent upon that location, how would you deal with it if they couldn't get to you physically?
Right. So, this is like the first step to putting together your disaster recovery plans, because you've got to kind of think of the different types of things that could actually halt your business. And somewhere in this plan, you need to have a scenario that what happens if you get really sick?
Yeah.
Or if something happened to you, how would your business keep going? Or if something happened to one of your key employees or subcontractors, or even things like, if something happened to your spouse or one of your children or someone really close to you, how would you keep going? Right? Because that's something that would really impact your business and your ability to work in your business.
Because very few businesses function well without the owners in place, especially the smaller they are, the less effective they are at functioning without the key stakeholders there.
Exactly. So that's something that a lot of times we don't, we think about everyone around us, but we don't think about what would happen if we weren't able to work, or if something happened that caused us to have to step away from the business.
And
how would that work?
And this is one of those things too, where for a very small business, let's say it's a sole proprietorship and you run it by yourself, if you were to pass away or become incapacitated to the level you could not run that business anymore, you need insurance that will actually cover the loss of income. And that's really what life insurance is for. Long-term care insurance is for mitigating the loss of income and offsetting maybe the expenses if you have to be in a long-term care type of situation.
Right. So, one of the first things that you need to do after you start kind of brainstorming different scenarios is you have to think about what are your most valuable assets. And these aren't just physical assets. These are things like subcontractors, employees. Make a list of all of those assets. And that might end up causing you to go back to part one and brainstorming more scenarios. Because the goal for this is that for you to be able to pull this out and say, okay, we've had this happen in the business. What's our plan going forward? Because the last thing that you want to do is be in the midst of having lost your home or lost your business and then trying to figure out, oh my God, okay, now what's the plan? That's why you have the plan in place to begin with.
Yes.
Okay, so that's why we're doing that ahead of time. So I also want you to consider the documents that you need to protect. So, most businesses have a file of really important documents. It's like all your incorporation documents, your EIN, your sales tax certificate, all of these really important, documents you have. And even think about the documents you have on the personal side. Things like wedding certificates, birth certificates, your insurance, Social Security, your insurance policies. You also want to think about how you're going to protect those documents as well. Okay, so let's talk about paper first. We actually did a webinar on this last week where we talked a lot about, how to deal with paper. So, I'd recommend scanning all of your most important documents. I would even have scans of things like your passport, your driver's license, any business licenses you have. Anything that if there was a disaster and you just had to go, you're going to want to make sure that you have a scanned copy of these things.
Yeah. That's where we talk about software like Cam Scanner all the time. If they're individual documents, you can do that. If you've scanned them in with a more powerful like tabletop scanner, have the files located in a place that you can access them via your phone.
Right, exactly. Because I know that if I'm running out of the house, the phone is coming with.
Yeah.
Right. So, you don't necessarily want to store them on the phone, but you want to make sure that you have some sort of, encrypted storage where you can put these documents. And you want to make sure that your passwords for these are incredibly strong. Because if this ever got hacked, now they've got your social security number, they've got your driver's license, they've got your passport. So you want to make sure that like the strongest passwords that you have are protecting these documents.
And this is one of the very valid reasons for encryption. A lot of people think, well, it's sitting out on the web. It's like in Dropbox or Google Drive. Well, that's nice, but encrypt your documents if they contain sensitive information that could ruin you. That could cause people to steal your identity or the identity of your customers, because Dropbox just announced this week that they were hacked. About 60 million people were affected, I believe.
Yep.
But they announced it this week. It happened in 2012.
Right. Yeah. No, I got that notification, which I'm like, all right, I'm glad that it's just my pictures that are up there. And this is where something like having like Carbonite, where you could save all this stuff onto your desktop of your computer, and then it will automatically upload to Carbonite. The other thing I'd recommend is that when you create the folder that you put all this stuff in, don't put, important personal documents as the name of the folder. Have it be a little cryptic.
Smart tagging it, steal me.
Yes, exactly. So, you need to know what it is, but I wouldn't name the file so that, hackers are like, oh, yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing me in the right direction. So
this is also why a lot of times having like sort of dated folders that encapsulate stuff. So most of your important documents are going to be, in the first year of the business. So, in the 2016 folder, if that's when you started, you're going to have all of those important documents that you need to have at the beginning.
Right, exactly. So, just don't, make it easier for hackers to find that stuff. Consider a safe deposit box. It's funny because when I first started working in 2001, a lot of businesses had safe deposit boxes. And that was kind of the place that they put, all those important documents, because typically that vault is, it's reinforced. It's hard to get into. Most of them are waterproof, so unless the entire bank is destroyed, you have a pretty good chance of your documents being safe there.
You're much more likely to lose your home than to lose your documents in a bank.
Right. So, I would consider getting a safe deposit box for really important stuff. They're not that expensive. Most of my clients that still have them are paying less than $100 a year. I know that it can be a pain to have to go there and get your documents, but it would be much more of a pain and much more costly for you to have to replace all of those documents.
Now, I want to put out a quick warning to if there's anyone out there who uses the old-fashioned method of backing up stuff on either tapes or backing up stuff on USB plug-in hard drives or flash sticks, and then putting them in one of those fire boxes in the same facility thinking that it's safe. And in many cases, it might be. The problem being if there's a fire or something that causes extreme heat to the box, the device itself might melt. It might become unusable if it's in the same location as the computers. That's why the key word when it comes to backing up is off-site. Your important data, your important information needs to be backed up somewhere other than your house. I don't care if if you have a zipped up, password protected file in your Gmail account. It's irrelevant to me, but you need to have it off-site.
Right. So, and we're going to get to, we're going to talk about that when we get to electronic files. But, that might be, a good option. If you have paper that you need to store, you should try to keep the paper in higher places. So I know like a lot of people store paper like in their basement. Try to keep it on, upper level shelves. And I know that's kind of a pain in the butt because the boxes are really heavy, but that will help protect you if there's water coming into your home. You also want to consider keeping that paper in plastic bins.
Yeah.
Because then if you, especially if you're in a flood prone area or there's flood risk, we live in New England and we had, I think probably, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we had some major flooding in this area. And people had files on their floor. They had files kind of on the bottom shelves and they lost all that paper.
Yeah. And even on the bottom shelves, if it's in a tightly sealed plastic container, unless the water submerges it, it's likely to be safer. The worst thing that you can get are those cardboard boxes that you put paper in, because as soon as any level of the water reaches that cardboard, it gets absorbed up into the paper. And that's the last thing that you want. Right.
And then, we want you to think about if you have old paper, that is tinder for fire. Okay. Because it's very dry. If a fire starts in your house is going to go up very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Or in your office. And so you should consider either paying to store that off site if there are things that you can't digitize, or, you're kind of going through the process of digitizing it, or just digitize it.
Yes. We're very big fans of going paperless for multiple reasons. And the big one is you can't store all this paper in your house. Now, be careful if there are legal rules surrounding you retaining records. If you're unsure, talk to a lawyer who specializes in it and verify that what you're doing will be legitimate in case those papers are ever needed. But if you're not required to have the physical paper, try and scan it, put it into a file system on your computer that you can then push offsite that way. Try not to keep any paper that you don't have to have.
Right. And we showed in the webinar this week, I have a scanner. It's a ScanSnap scanner, and we'll link all the resources that we talk about today, because there's probably going to be a lot of them. They'll all be in the show notes for this episode. So just go to smallbizlife.com, look for episode 53. But this is actually like, if you've got kids that are, 10 to 12 years old, or older than that, this would actually be a really good job for the kids. Let them scan all the files for you. Then you can, if they're old enough, then they can kind of help you with the filing system. If not, it's just a huge thing just to get all those files onto the computer, and then you can kind of go back and organize them later.
And if you have a huge influx of paper that comes in your businesses, and some businesses do, where you get a lot of paperwork sent to you all the time, have a plan in place for converting that to digital, or doing what you need to with it. Like perhaps you have to do some work with it, but you're required to retain the paperwork for some federal law. Well, you have to do that. But, services like Iron Mountain, you can actually take all of the paperwork, archive boxes of it to them. I don't know the cost on that because we don't personally use it. We prefer digitization, and we don't have to keep the physical paper for most of the things that we do.
Right. So, I don't like having Tinder in my house.
Yes.
Right. So, that's another reason that we went paperless.
Think about it like this. You go to the store, you buy those little twigs of sticks to throw in with your wood in the fireplace to start the fire quickly. Well, imagine like filling your basement up with that. That's kind of what you're doing. If something was to spark that off, your basement goes up, and then your whole house is gone.
Right. Okay. So now let's talk about what to do with electronics. So, Jeff already kind of mentioned this, but you should use an offsite backup. We use Carbonite for that. And I will tell you, one of the reasons that I am as organized as I am is because the first year I was in business, my computer crashed on April 14th. And thank God I had Carbonite on my computer because I was back up and running in about an hour.
For those of you who don't realize, Kristen is a CPA who does taxes, and that is the day before the deadline.
Right. So I'm like freaking out because it's April 14th and I've still got all this work to do, and my computer crashed. But luckily, I had another computer in the house. I was able to get my software on there, got all my files off of Carbonite, and was ready to go. And I didn't have to freak out and worry about, oh my God, how am I going to get this back? I didn't even worry about that. I'm like, I'm just going to get on another computer, download what I need, and keep going.
Yep.
And we'll deal with the other computer after tax season's over.
Yes.
So, that has completely saved my butt. I've had other clients that have had computer issues. They thought they lost QuickBooks, but they had Carbonite. We just pulled the file back down and they were ready to go. So.
And another benefit for people who live in low bandwidth areas for a service like Carbonite versus like using a Dropbox or Google Drive to upload all of your documents to, is you can set up, it does what they call a differential or incremental backup. So essentially you can set it so the first time you back up, it's everything. And then it looks for things that have newer versions of itself. So if it has not backed it up in the past, or if you've saved it since it backed it up, it will back up only the files you need to. And you can set it to happen at a time when you're asleep, but it doesn't use as much bandwidth as in taking all of the contents every time and putting them somewhere.
Right, exactly. So, and if you tried Carbonite when it first came out, it's much more user-friendly if you need to access files. So say you need to grab something on your phone or you need to grab something on another computer, it's become much more user-friendly for that. So, it's not just a backup system, but it's actually a file recovery system or a file access system.
And that's also not to say you can't use Dropbox or Google Drive. Chris and I use Google Drive extensively, but the kinds of documents we keep there are sort of things that we think we have a higher need to get to more quickly. So like, I have a folder that has every episode I've ever recorded for this show. And there's another one for every show we record for Small Biz Life, and World Builders Anvil, both in different spots. But we can go into there. We can find all the images we've created. We can find the notes for this show. Anything related to that show is in that one folder.
Right. Okay. So this is kind of one of my things, especially because most of the electronics we have now, very few people have desktops anymore. Everybody has laptops and tablets and their cell phones. Keep all your electronics charged.
Mm-hmm.
Because then that way, if you have a power issue, then you still have power in your electronics to be able to power them down. And then that way too, like if you've got to grab and go, you've got things that have power in them. They don't have to be plugged in immediately.
Yeah, and that reminds me a lot. We had a massive ice storm in October. I think this was right after Tropical Storm Sandy had hit. It was the year after. We had a worse storm, actually, that was an ice storm that took out vast swaths of power in central and southern New England. And it was devastating. I mean, the average people were out of power for a week, and which is very cold up here. So there's other concerns. But the biggest problem I remember in talking to people was they were trying to find a place to charge their phone.
Right. And that was like the kind of the biggest thing was that, you had all these like charging stations.
Yeah.
So like if the town hall had power, they had charging stations. And that was the biggest thing is everybody trying to keep their cell phones charged because that was the only way that they could communicate with people. There are also these really cool power banks that you can buy. And they're not super expensive. You can usually get them between $10 and $30. But what it'll do is it'll hold a charge for your cell phone. So it's really great, like if you go to conferences and stuff like that, and you know that you're not going to have enough battery life. But it's also great in case of emergency that you can just plug your phone into this and it's going to recharge your phone.
And the other interesting thing too, the advantage of having charges, especially like in the phones, like at the same time people were stressing out trying to figure out where to get gas for their car and then trying to figure out how to charge their phone. I was on my phone looking up where the power outages were and were not. Kristen was on her phone in Priceline finding a hotel a little bit away from all of the outages that we could get on Priceline cheaply. So we had a place to stay that was warm, and we had an idea of where the power was and was not. And we took advantage of those moments, and then we got to a place where we could then charge our phones.
Right, exactly. So, keeping your electronics charged is really important. Make sure that you have passwords to access your computer and all of your sensitive programs. So this is more if your device is physically misplaced or physically stolen. Make sure that, you log into the computer with a password and that you, like if you're using QuickBooks Desktop or another piece of accounting software that's installed locally on the computer, make sure that those things are password protected.
And another thing is if someone gets a hold of the physical hard drive and you have very sensitive data on there, you might want to consider software that will allow you to remotely wipe your hard drive. You can get these for phones. You can get these for computers. But if you're storing someone's life there, and, it's like a laptop that you carry around, it's a high risk of being lost or stolen. You need a way to be able to ensure that it's wiped. And there is software that will do it. So
right. And one of the things that I do, because I deal with a lot of sensitive information, my laptop that I use to do taxes does not leave my office. I have another laptop that I travel with that does not have that information on it. And so if I do not want to take this laptop with me.
And it's another strength of using something like a Dropbox or Google Drive to store your documents in, because what you could do too at that point is if someone, like say, breaks into the house and steals your computer, you can go on your Google Drive, change the password.
Right, exactly. So you can change the password for Dropbox and Google Drive.
And remember, too, if this happens, I believe it's law at this point that you are required to inform your customers that their data has been put at risk, even if you don't know if it's been taken or if it will ever actually be compromised.
Right. So as a CPA, I'm actually required to include a privacy statement every year with people's tax returns. And that privacy statement says that, we use third-party encrypted vendors, to protect their data. But we're required by law to disclose that the data is not just here. And if anybody ever asks me about it, I just say that is something that we do to protect your data, to make sure that we don't lose it. The encryption that we use for our data is much more secure than having paper files. Like, it would be much harder for somebody to break into my electronic files than, think about how you're storing your paper files, right? And even most CPAs and law firms I know, they don't lock down their paper files at night, so that is much easier to steal than trying to break into one of the computers.
Well, and typically to crowbar most file cabinets is much easier than unencrypting files.
Right, exactly. So, go through, make sure that those passwords, that they're strong passwords. The computers that we have now, we can actually code it so that you need our fingerprints in order to be able to get into the computer. So that's something that you can use. A lot of the new phones now have, retina recognition in order to be able to get into the phones. So, there's a lot of different things that you can use so that you don't have to remember another password. Okay. And, we're big fans of LastPass. That's the password vault that we use. So, if you're worried about having to remember all of these passwords, writing them down in a little book that you keep next to your computer is really not a good secure option.
Or on that Post-it note you stick on the monitor of that computer.
Yep, that's not a good option either. So, something like LastPass will store all of your passwords for you. Really, the only passwords that you need to remember is you need to remember the password to get into your computer and the password to get into LastPass.
And most computers now, at least with Windows 10 and on, typically have a PIN option for a physical computer. So a lot of times they try and get you to connect to their online accounts. But as an added layer of security on your physical computer, you can set up a PIN, and then you have, it's like when you put your ATM card in, it's there, it's only local on your computer, and it's another way of securing it, but having a little bit easier thing to remember than an actual password that's a strong password for the internet.
Right. And, one of the things that I like about QuickBooks Online is that if I try to log into my file from a computer that it doesn't recognize, and usually this cookie expires, I think, every 30 days. So even on my primary computer, I've got to do this, but it will make you verify either via text message or email that you are who you say you are. So that's kind of a nice added level of security when you're working with sensitive data online. And my QuickBooks file has all my client names in it. It's tied to my banking information. So that's kind of a nice extra layer that I like. And I think one more thing, when you have the option to do multi-layer authentication going into, say, your bank, right? So when I log into my bank, I need my password, I need my PIN, and I need to answer a security question. And
or sometimes there will be pictures, and you have to remember a picture when you set up your account as a popular one. Another popular one is SMS messaging, where you set up your phone when you create your account, and then it will text a message to your phone, and you have to put a code in to get into that session of the web visit.
But don't disable that, because most banks will give you the option to say, remember me, and it will let you bypass some of that security. Don't do that.
No.
The more layers of security you have when you go into something that's really sensitive, like either QuickBooks Online or your bank, the better.
If you have a social media you don't care about is one thing, but especially when it comes to your financials, never have anything remember.
Right. So that's the thing, I make sure that I have to put everything in every time, I go into something that's got sensitive data. Make sure that you keep your antivirus up to date. Okay, that's really important. We talked about physical security already. Make sure that, if you live in an area that, has a higher crime rate, a security system is a really good idea. Make sure that your electronics are not visible through windows, right? Because then you're just kind of making your home a target or making your office a target. You want to make sure that paper is protected, that, you might even want to consider, having like a laptop lock, and locking your computer down to your desk if that's something that you're worried about.
And remember too, especially they look at this a lot with especially like data breaches. Most theft of data happens from employees, not from outside attacks. So realize if you have employees that work for you, or possibly like if your family might use the computer that you use, either on purpose or on accident, they could cause your data to be lost. Either accidentally destroyed or, they've just uploaded your client detail list to Facebook.
Right. So you got to be really careful about stuff like that. And then, one thing that's really helped me in the past, have a list of important programs that you would need to reinstall on your computer in case either, your computer's lost, your computer crashes, it's stolen, you just get a new computer. Have a list of programs. So, for me, it's my tax software, QuickBooks, the Microsoft suite, that stuff that I really need in order for my business to function.
Have a list of all of the software that you use for your business on your computer. If it comes with a security code that you have to enter in when you install it, take a copy of that and store in there as well too. And if there's a link to get downloads from the company you bought it from, you could put that instead of the actual software. But the thing is, even if you're just replacing a computer, it could be a real hassle to remember all that stuff until you need it. So it's nice to have one place that you can go check it out and go, okay, let me download. And oh wait, I lost the CD. Yeah, that's bad too. So you have to keep tracks of the CDs if they come on them, which isn't often anymore. But if they are on CD, you need that. You need the security codes, and you just need to make sure that you have it all on a new computer, whether it's because you just got a new computer or because you have to get it up and going because you lost your old one.
Right, exactly. So, you could use a Word file for this or an Excel file for this, just something so that you have it all in one place.
And this is once again the advantage of something like Carbonite versus something like a Google Drive or a Dropbox, because if your computer gets corrupted by a virus and you have to reinstall Windows and start from scratch, it will actually download everything, including the files that were installed on your computer. But because of that, you also have to make sure that you have multiple backups. So if the virus got uploaded to your backup, you don't lose all of your backed up data too.
Well, and that's why one of the things, with Carbonite is Carbonite will only back up the folders that you tell it to. So if you have it back up, your desktop, your documents, your pictures, as long as you're not going into the programs file, the programs folder on your, C drive or your D drive, then usually the likelihood that you're going to pick up the virus with it is not very high. So that's one thing that I kind of like about Carbonite is you tell it what you want, to go up to that. Okay, so let's talk about some general kind of planning things. And a lot of these things this is for both business and personal. Okay. So one thing that you want to do, and if you don't have these yet, go do this this week. You want to take pictures of all of your assets and your valuables. So it's a really good idea to kind of go through your house and take a picture of every room from different angles. Because essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a gallery of photos that you could give your insurance company if there was a loss in your house.
Yes.
And this is to kind of document, like, yes, I do have, a 70-inch TV. Yes, I do have, this hardwood bed set. You're going through saying, these are all the things I have. And that's like the easiest way to do it, because if we try to make a list, you're going to forget things. So just kind of, go into different rooms in your home, take pictures from multiple angles. If you have things that are very valuable, take pictures of those by themselves, and take a really good picture. Like if it's a computer, get a picture of the serial number tag on the computer. Do that for any electronic devices so you know exactly what model you have. And you can prove that, this was the serial number from this device in case it gets destroyed. So that's a really good thing to do. Make sure that you have enough insurance. Okay. I think a lot of times, we buy insurance and then we just kind of, we keep renewing it year after year after year, and we're not really looking at our coverages. We're not looking to make sure that we have replacement coverage, because by default, a lot of insurance policies, they're based on the depreciated value of your asset.
Yeah.
So if you have a 5-year-old computer, you're going to get $50 for it or $100 for it. We pay a little bit extra to have replacement coverage, which means they have to replace the asset so that I can be back up and running again.
But that's also on our homeowners. We do not have $50,000 $2 a month warranties that we have to pay out whenever we buy new electronics.
Right. So, we don't go for extended warranties, but we do make sure that our homeowners insurance is, has more than enough coverage to replace what we need. Okay. And taking those pictures is going to help you if you ever have a claim. You want to know the role of all your key employees and your key subcontractors. This is so that if something happens to someone within your organization, including you, that you have a list of what this person does for your business. So let's say that you've got a virtual assistant or you have an administrator and something happens to that person. They leave, they quit, they just kind of wig out and disappear. You want to be able to know what functions they perform in your business so that you can replace them with someone else.
And the more valuable their expertise is not uncommon for large companies to have life insurance policies to cover people who have high impact on their company. This isn't talking about the policies that maybe you're going to pay out to the family. This is for the company to recover damages from the loss of a key player.
Right. So if you have a partner in your business or you have an employee that is just critical to your organization, you can actually take out life insurance, the business can, on this person so that the business gets paid if something happens to them. And that's actually, that can be really helpful for a business in order to be able to hire somebody quickly to get back up and running.
Yeah.
One thing, and if you've listened to us for a while, you know that, we're really big on, not using debt and making sure that we have an emergency fund set up. If you have a disaster situation or an emergency situation in your business, an emergency fund is so important because this will allow you to buy the equipment you need to get up and running. This will give you the freedom that if something happens in your life and you need to step away from your business, you have money to keep going.
Yes. And I think, the thing to keep in mind here is, if like say for us, if we were to lose our studio and all of our computers all in one day, we don't want to wait for the insurance company to be able to have the cash for us to start replacing the assets that we need to, at a minimal, at least, function the company.
Right, exactly. So, and for our business, we don't have a separate business and personal emergency fund. We just have a big, huge emergency fund that will cover either or.
Yeah.
So if we need to loan that money to the business, then we can do that. Or if it's on our personal side, we're still okay. But like Jeff said, I don't want to have to wait for insurance to be able to get my business up and running. I'm going to be going to Best Buy that day and, replacing computers and, ordering from Amazon to replace equipment so that we can get up and running.
Definitely.
So, no alternative temporary work locations. So, it's funny because I talk to business owners about this all the time, that they say they can't focus at home, or they just need to get out of the house. Have a list of places where you can go work if you can't work from home.
Yeah.
And don't just have them in your town. Sometimes have them a little bit further out. Jeff was saying that when the power went out, he was looking at the map to see who had power, while I was on Priceline trying to figure out where we could stay. Think about some locations where you could temporarily work. This could be places like your local library, right? Because they're going to have power and internet. Maybe if you lose power at home, think about places like a couple towns away. I know our library has reciprocal agreements with other libraries, so I can go to other towns and use their Wi-Fi and use their libraries because I'm a member of our local library.
If you are a retailer or a storefront of any kind, you have that physical location, again, that's critical to your business. Start scouting out similar locations in your town or the surrounding towns around you, because let's say, your part of town gets flooded out and is destroyed, and you have the money, you need to know locations where you think your business could operate out of. And you might even change because the location you're in is no longer as good as it used to be. But you should be kind of doing that anyway to say, okay, if I move my lease from here, where are similar types of places I want to go to, or the next rung of places I want to go to if I want to, become a bit higher end. Maybe these are the next a little bit nicer locations I could go to. So you have a range of places where you'd have to start looking and you'd have to move quickly. But the thing is, you would have an idea of where.
Right, exactly. And then, if you do need to work from a public location, make sure that you have a VPN.
And if you're working with sensitive information, you want a screen protector for your laptop. So if people aren't looking straight at it, they cannot see what you're typing.
Right, exactly. And then you want to, as part of this plan, you also want to do some succession planning. So what happens in your business if something happens to you?
Yeah.
Or if you have a partner, what happens if something happens to your partner?
Or that key employee, or even if it's your lower skilled labor, having a succession plan in place might be, these are the tasks that they do. What's the best way for me to train the next person that covers that job?
Yeah, I was at an economic forum a couple days ago, and they were saying that businesses anticipate that 16% of their workforce is going to retire within the next 5 years. And so what do you do when that knowledge, is retiring? And this is even, for you, I think a lot of people, they think that like, okay, I'm going to sell my business, and retire. How are you going to do that? Where are you going to find that buyer? A lot of times that buyer comes from someone within your organization. And a lot of times we have branded our business as us, and the likelihood that we are going to be able to sell it, I'm going to be honest with you guys, is not very good.
Yeah.
And so, you've got to look at what are the assets that I have. How can I develop, last week we talked about products and services. What products and services do you have that would actually be sellable?
Yeah. It's the difference between having the Jeff Ingram's great service thing that you sell versus just the great service thing that you sell, because people are more likely to possibly want to buy the branded service that you sell. But if you start personalizing the names of all of the services to you, and you've branded the business to yourself, certain assets you have might sell in the business, but the likelihood that someone's going to want to step in and start doing Jeff Ingram's business is less likely.
Right. And so, you kind of see this with what Dave Ramsey is doing with his business, that as he's getting older, he's focusing less on it being Dave Ramsey and more on bringing up other personalities and even bringing some of his kids into the business and they're becoming personalities, than it just being all about him.
Yeah.
And so this is something that you need to be thinking about right now. Is this a legacy that you want to leave to your children? Is there someone in your family that's interested in taking over this business? Or do you have an employee that might be interested in taking over your business? And start having those discussions about what that would look like.
Yep.
Do you start letting them buy into the business, before you retire? Do you wait until you're ready to retire? How do you work this out so that you can transition the business to another generation?
And this is one of those things, too, where it's a really good idea to talk to an attorney who specializes in this and a CPA to make sure that you're doing it in the best financial way for both you and the person that you're transitioning to.
Yeah, because I've had, I've seen scenarios where a parent will go to their, accountant and their attorney and say, all right, how do I start, getting rid of assets and gifting them to children? And they, they'll gift part of their business to one of their kids. And now the kid has income on their tax return, and I really shouldn't say kid because these are people like, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that are seeing this happen. But now they have pass-through income from the parents' business, and they're paying taxes on it, but they're not receiving any income from the business. And, some of those deals, we've had to actually undo them.
Yeah.
Because it was causing financial harm to the next generation. So you really have to have a discussion with, if you want to do this with your kids, have a discussion with your kids. Don't just do things that are going to impact them without letting them know. And
not only that, though, even if once you've talked to them and you've determined this is the best course of action, that's when you want to go to the attorney and the CPA to verify that there's not some tax reason or some legal reason that will invalidate what you're doing and possibly make it worse for them.
Right. And I see this a lot with like rental real estate, that as the parents are getting older, they're like, well, I've got to start gifting some of this away. But then they don't realize that they're generating, taxes for their kids or their grandkids or whoever they're giving it to. So you've got to be really careful to make sure that everybody is in the loop and everybody understands how this is going to impact them.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I hope that this episode was really helpful and it gave you some things to think about. If you have any questions about anything we talked about today, you can go to smallbizlife.com and you can comment on the show notes for this episode, or you can join our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/group/smallbizlife. Great group of people, super helpful, lots of experience, and they're willing to share. It's a closed group, so people outside the group can't read what you're posting. It's a really safe place as a business owner to, ask questions and share ideas and share thoughts. So we'd love to have you there if you're listening. And we'll see you next week.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to Small Biz Life. If you enjoyed the show, please take a few minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Stitcher. Please visit smallbizlife.com to view today's show notes, take this week's poll, join the Facebook community, follow us on Twitter, or submit a question for the mailbag. Support the show by checking the resources page or by going to smallbizlife.com/Amazon whenever you shop.
This was Small Biz Life.